Okay, so if any of you have turned in just a few seconds early, we have a special guest today. And I want to thank our sponsor and give a shout out to Chad Christ, who has the Luscious Moss Studio in Edgewood, Washington. He is primarily for drummers, recordings, and guitarists, but he also does other things. He's obviously done my music, produced my music, and he tries to create the ambiance that encourages collaboration and creativity. So with that being said, hopefully you can find him on the internet and give him a call. I'd like to introduce our guest today. I have Chris Stevens from Chris Stevens Band. He does not have an hour for us today, so it's going to be a rather short interview, but it will take about 30 minutes. So I hope you all tune in. Please let me know who you are. I cannot see if you don't log your name in when you come on to our station. So how are you doing, Chris? And thank you for being with us today.
I'm doing fine, Joy. Thank you for inviting me.
And you're very welcome.
Yes. It's a nice rainy day today.
Yeah, typical Washington as usual.
Yeah.
So one of the first questions I ask my guests when they come on is, how you got into music. What was your motivating factor? And how young were you? What instrument did you choose? A little bit about how music came to mean as much as it does to you, so much that you teach it, and you're a renowned player.
Well, I guess that took a while to get to all where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And all kinds of different things would have happened. But I suppose that, I was growing up as a young kid, up till say the age of 11 or 12. There wasn't really a lot of music being played in the house. My mom had a radio that was in her room, and she would set it to KIXI at a very low level and kind of this soft music in the background. But we would have our little transistor radios, and I would listen to KJR and KOL AM radio.
Is that here in Washington? I'm not from here.
I was here in, Seattle area. Those were the two main radio stations that played, I guess, pop music. There was no FM at that point when I was those age. So I didn't really pay much attention. I just sort of remember that when the Beatles hit, there was something different about this music, and I started listening to that. So I became more interested in, listening to the songs on the radio. And I was attracted to that sound, and I think I liked guitars. I didn't have a guitar, but I liked the sound of them. And sometimes there were kids in the neighborhood that would have guitars, and I always liked to pick them up and, do whatever to them, not really play them. So I knew that I wanted to have one. And I guess it was on my 13th birthday that I was finally given a guitar from Sears. And that's kind of how that started. And then I was probably because I seemed to be interested in music, and my parents got me a record player. I was the only one in the family that ever had a record player. And I never had a huge collection of records, but I started buying. My first album was the Beatles' second album. And then, and I remember having Jimi Hendrix's first album, and just a handful of others,
Wait, what age were you when you started playing?
Well, I got the guitar when I was 13.
Oh, so you're a teenager. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just kind of goofed around on it, on my own. I guess I might have had a lesson at the church or something. And at one point in junior high, there was a kid that moved to my school, and he claimed to play the drums. And I said I played the guitar, but pretty much I just had a guitar. And he said, "Oh,
Yeah.
let's start a band." So, at that point, I guess I figured I would have to get some lessons. So
Great.
at about the age of 15, I think I got signed up for guitar lessons. So that's when I really sort of started to learn how to play things.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was kind of mid-teenage years that I sort of started to play.
Well, you started a little later than some of our guests, but it sounds to me like you picked it up pretty quickly. Your teacher, did he have a particular style, or he or she, whatever, whoever taught you guitar must have done a good job.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the teacher that I had in junior high and through high school, he was a guy that really wasn't that much older to me. I was going to Cascade Junior High in White Center.
Okay.
And that was right next to Evergreen High School, where I eventually went there. But he was actually going to Evergreen High School, and I was, when I started, and by the time I got into high school, he had graduated. So he wasn't all that older to me, and he just sort of taught me basic guitar. He never taught me how to play any kind of rock and roll or anything like that, but he did teach me some jazz guitar things. He was into jazz guitar. He had been taught by a really great local jazz guitarist named Jim Day, who was a South End guy, and Jim ended up managing and owning Farmer's Music, which was in Burien, and that's where Joe Farmer Music. That's where I ended up having my lessons.
So, going from there, you said you formed a band? What was the name of the band, and how did it go when you were?
What was that again?
I said, what was the name of the band that you formed, and how did it go?
No, there was never any band formed.
Oh no.
No.
But you did take the lessons.
No, the lessons proved to be okay, but no, we never formed a band. Yeah, I remember he told me in order to form this band, I was supposed to go out and buy this record by the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. Somehow he knew about the Paul Butterfield Blues Band way back at this time, and I didn't know anything about that kind of music.
Right.
And I was supposed to get this record and learn how to play like Mike Bloomfield, who was the guitarist in that band. And I went, okay, I got the record, and I put it on, and I get, what? Are you nuts? I can't possibly do this. And maybe that was part of the impetus of me thinking I needed to get some lessons. So, I wasn't talented, and I didn't even have an electric guitar. So the actual band never came to fruition.
Oh, so
it was
you must have had a band sometime after that. When was the next period after you took these lessons that you finally did start playing publicly?
Well, that would be by not until being in high school as a senior. No. So I just had my lessons, and I practiced at home and played, and I didn't really play in public or be in any group. But in high school, I signed up to be in the jazz ensemble.
Wow.
They called it stage band at that time.
That's where the jazz came from, right?
Well, yeah. And the lessons that I'd had even prior to that were kind of somewhere. They were sort of between basic learning how to read music and certain jazz guitar techniques. I was a member of the high school jazz band, playing rhythm guitar.
Rhythm.
Yeah, I didn't. Not much. I was never asked to play a solo or anything like that, and
That came later, right?
the horn players get the solos in jazz ensemble
Did
typically.
you ever hear of a player around these parts called Bill Garner?
Bill Garner?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm not sure.
Okay. Well,
By
he
the last
was
name.
what do they call that? Can't think of it. It's a form of country music. I don't remember what it's called because I don't like it. But he was my lead for a while, and he was a touring musician. He was professional. I mean, that's where he earned his living, and he was trying to explain jazz to me. All I know is that it looks awfully complicated. The licks and the way you go about playing the music is a lot different than three chords and the truth of country.
Yeah. Well, maybe that was Western swing.
Oh, that's it. Yes.
That's
Yes.
like, country music that's a little closely related to jazz, having the swing style
Ah.
and some of the chords being more than just major and minor chords, you know. But yeah.
So I also understand that you're an instructor, and it's not just that you're an instructor. From the very first time you were on the bandstand when I came in, the Twin Dragon, people were telling me, "Oh, this guy is a great guitar instructor, and he's well known in the area." So, can you share some of that with us? I know you're not accepting students at the moment, but I hear a lot of rave reviews about your teaching abilities. So, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on that. Do you teach a particular type of, like, for instance, I'm learning the cage system. Uh, I'll never be a lead. I didn't even want to go there. But I didn't know I didn't know the fretboard, and I didn't really know a lot of the little shortcuts and things that you can take. So, uh, can you give us an idea of what you teach and how you teach it and how long you've been teaching?
Well, okay. So I guess I decided that I could try to teach guitar, um, to earn a living way back when.
Were you a professional musician then? That's how you made your living through your life?
Well, I mostly have been a professional musician, but I've had other jobs as well. Like,
Oh,
for example, sort of at that period of time, I was working for Boeing.
oh yeah.
I was a
Yeah.
drafter at Boeing.
Huh.
And anyway, I just decided that maybe I could do this. So that was, in very early 1980s.
Wow.
And I guess I didn't know exactly what to do other than, remember what the teacher taught me before. And so I don't do necessarily a specific program. I take any students, beginners or advanced, if I can handle them, if I can stay a step ahead of them, you know.
Yeah.
And so I have people of all ages and sort of many different styles of guitar playing. So I will teach people, basic guitar. If if they're in the, teenagers or younger, I will have them learn to read music. Adult students, perhaps. It sort of depends on their interest and how I can tell what they're going to practice or not. If I teach them to read music, they might not practice it at all. So I try to go a different way with them. So yeah, we do. I might teach certain famous pop songs, easy things to beginners. We play Yellow Submarine or or
Beatles again.
any
Yeah.
kind of song that you can play easily with just a few chords. And then we might learn to, play some simple rock riffs and stuff. But there are other students who I will teach. I play nowadays mostly blues guitar when I'm
Right.
performing.
Yes.
I do certain jazz guitar things, but mostly I'm playing blues. So I do have some students that are interested in that. Not everybody, but we'll learn to play blues from either from its very foundation, or if they already know some things, we'll get into more detail of specific blues artists and learn their solos and stuff.
Right.
And I have certain
Can I
students that
stop
we
you
play
here for a minute?
jazz.
Chris, can I stop you for just 1 minute here? We've got
Yes.
someone called Funky Almadina. This is people who interview artists, but they're in foreign country. Both of them, there's two of them that used to do their show. So I do want to say hi to them and thank you for joining us today. So back to where we were at. We were talking about the different levels of ability when it comes to your teaching. And you were just saying something about jazz when I cut you off. Do you remember what you were talking about? Sorry about
Well, I was
that.
just sort of telling you that I have, I take students that are interested in different styles, and so we might focus on blues or jazz, or typically a lot of people are really interested in rock. Most young people get an electric guitar, they want to play rock. So I typically use classic rock tunes to deal with, but sometimes a student will be interested in a certain song that we'll figure out how to play it, and it might be a modern current song, but just all kinds of styles. And sometimes I try to teach students who are open to it to play many of these different styles.
Yes, exactly. That's we have a question here from Funky Medina. Asked whether he said basically what genre is the easiest to teach.
Oh, the easiest to teach. Well, I suppose the easiest to teach is kind of depends on the student, how easy the student is to teach.
You'd
So
be pulling your hair out with me.
I don't have a good answer for that, other than it's easiest to teach the simplest possible thing because it's usually easiest to pick that up. So for me, it's easy to teach blues because I'm playing blues so much.
Right.
And I kind of know a lot of stuff about that. And so perhaps it's what I'm more versed at.
Yeah. So going back, we kind of skipped over your first band. When did you first started playing in public for money? We kind of didn't get there. And I understand that this area, all of the greater Seattle area, including Tacoma, was really, there were a lot of clubs to play in at that time. And a lot of the country people that I know were really working all the time. I mean, it wasn't just here and there, it was everywhere. Is that true? Did you experience any of that with the blues, or had the blues movement not yet caught hold like it is today?
Well, excuse me. When I started playing in the rock band, I started playing, I guess, I was in the jazz ensembles, and then after my first year of college, I was in the jazz ensemble at Western Washington State College at that time. It's now Western Washington State University. So I played there. There was no money involved.
Yeah.
And then, well, I guess there's some amount of money involved here. I was drafted into the Army.
Oh, no.
And I managed to get eventually, after being in the service for a few months, I was transferred into the Army band.
Oh, that's an
So,
accomplishment.
well, it was a lucky thing because the duty was, kind of easy, and um,
Where were you
I
stationed?
sort of lucked into this position.
Were you overseas at the time, or were you here in
Yeah,
the
I was in
States?
South Korea.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, I had been sent there. I had been trained as a missile crewman, and they sent me to South Korea. And I was headed. I arrived on the airplane at Osan Air Force Base. I arrived there. They put us on a bus to Seoul, Korea, which is the big city in South Korea, and the biggest main army base. And there was a layover there before I was to get on the bus to go out to this smaller camp where I would be stationed. It was about 45 minutes out of Seoul. So there was an hour or so layover. And I just started walking around the base, and I saw the Army band building, and I walked in, and you could not be a guitarist. Well, what I'm trying to say is guitar was not recognized as a legitimate instrument for a person to play in the military and just be called a musician. If you played the trombone or the saxophone or whatever, then you could perhaps get into the band. But no, I didn't. So there was one guy in the building, my hero, my pal, John Alexander. And I said to him, "Do you guys need a guitar player in the Army band?" And he goes, "Well, I'm the guitar player for the band."
Uh-huh.
He was also a saxophone player, so that was his main, duty as a saxophone player.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "But I am about, in just a month or so, I'm going to be discharged, and we have a big jazz ensemble concert coming up.
Oh,
I'll audition you." So he got the music, and because I had played in these jazz ensembles in high school and college, I was able to do it. He sat me down and I played some songs, and he got me a transfer after a couple of months. So then I played, I was in the Army band and doing a variety of things where sometimes I had to play the guitar, and otherwise I was really designated as a percussionist. And I played bass drum in the marching band and in the concert.
You played what?
Bass drum.
Oh, good gosh.
So actually, during that time, was the first time I formed a band or joined a band, with some other, soldiers that weren't in the band. There were some guys in the dental unit that had a rock band, and I managed to join them. And we did play some gigs around where we got paid. So those would be my first paid playing experiences, is playing with this group that I was in the Army in South Korea. And we would play like there was a teen club, for kids, officers and stuff.
Yeah.
And we would play there, and, just sporadically different things like that. So then when I was discharged, I got out of the Army. I returned to Seattle, and friends that I knew in high school that had a band while I was in high school were now in a more sort of advanced band, and they were playing like nightclubs and stuff around Seattle area. And they asked me to join them, and I did.
All right.
And that was kind of the first, local working band that I played in.
So
and we played high school dances, and we played taverns.
Yeah. Was like I asked about the music scene at the time, was it a busy music scene when you got back? Was there a lot of things going on in Seattle at the time?
Well, that would have been about 1974.
Oh, and, that's early. Yeah.
We got, we worked through an agency, and they got us plenty of work. Like I say, we would do, but this was rock band stuff.
Yeah.
We were playing what is now known as classic rock.
Right.
It was,
Yeah.
Contemporary rock at the time.
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, we played at the, taverns and dances around the Northwest. We would travel really kind of all over the place in the state of Washington, mostly. And then I didn't really know anything about that there was blues, that there were blues bands playing in Seattle.
Really?
Until probably about 1978, when I happened to see at a Bumbershoot Brian Butler's band.
Yeah.
So Brian Butler, who's now my friend, we played together in a band called Three Guitars once in a while, myself and Brian and Jack Cook. And so I saw him play at Bumbershoot. And he was a local guy playing blues. He had a blues band, had some great musicians with him. I'm not really sure who was with him at the time. I know Kim Field was with him playing harmonica. Maybe Les Merrihew was playing drums. I'm not sure if Mark Dalton was with him playing bass.
Yeah, Mark gets around, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, he's been playing blues,
and rock
for about as long as there's been electric blues going in Seattle. He moved here from Nebraska, sort of at that time when Tom McFarland and Isaac Scott were kind of the only guys, and Brian. So I started kind of following Brian on his gigs and going and watching him. And I didn't really know that there was what was known as the Pioneer Square music scene, at least starting to happen. I didn't really realize that until about, early in the 1980s. I met Tom Boyle. Tom Boyle is a great blues guitarist, and he's now in the T-Town Aces. But I met him, and he was in a band called Driving Wheel at the time with Howard Hooper on bass and Les Merrihew. I mentioned him on drums, and John Hodgkin was their vocalist. So they let me, and Tom had come at a rehearsal of the rock band that I was in and sat in with us. And so I went out one time and sat in with his band, and they would let me come on Friday or Saturday nights and bring my amp and play with them.
Oh, lovely.
Very nice. So that was my first experience in the blues band genre.
So how did you get this? We're almost out of time. I wish we had more time to get into some of this stuff, but half hour doesn't quite do it.
Well, we could spend a little more. I'll let you know.
Okay. So I understand from the readings that I've been doing about you that they call you the, I think it was called the B.B. King. You have a style of B.B. King. Could you explain that?
Somebody says I have a style like B.B. King.
Yes. There was somebody else too, but I'm not really up on all of these jazz and blues people. So I try, but I'm country.
Well, that sounds like probably somebody trying to describe, maybe how I play, and maybe they would say that I'm, kind of in the genre of the way B.B. King plays. I wouldn't say necessarily that I play like B.B. King. I know some of his licks, and I can play a few things that sort of sound like him. And I know a few licks, so I can sort of sound like T-Bone Walker, and I can sort of sound like a lot of people if I play a few things. But so I play electric blues guitar, and the first electric blues guitar I listened to, I mentioned, was Mike Bloomfield. And I told you I had bought that record by the Paul Butterfield Blues Band.
Right.
I didn't know anything about blues music at that time, but I knew that I liked it. I had never heard that kind of music before, and I would play it and I would listen to it. And then once I got into high school, and I met these friends that I told you about, that I eventually joined their band after I was out of the Army. My friend Bob, who lived down the street from me, he was the guitarist. And he was, I met him because he was in the high school jazz ensemble playing saxophone. Yeah. And one day he brought his guitar to school. And I found out that he could play rock guitar solos and stuff. I didn't know how to do that. So I started hanging around with him to learn to jam with him. And I did start putting on that Mike Bloomfield record and trying to pick out some of his phrases. So I learned probably some of the first blues guitar things were just a handful of things that Mike Bloomfield played. And then Bob and I would sit around and, try to jam on the blues and listen to blues records. And he had a record by B.B. King. Oh. I like that. So I went out and bought a record by B.B. King. So that would be the second blues guitarist that I really listened to. And so I would, learn a few phrases from them. So those two guys would have been sort of influential in my early learning of how to play the blues. And then Stevie Ray Vaughan came along, and that's where I really became attracted to that sound again. And once I started going out and finding out about this, what I'll call the Pioneer Square scene, where every night of the week you could go to like 10 or 12 clubs and see all these people playing.
Yes.
So I would watch these guys play live, people like Tom Boyle, and just pay attention and learn how to play different rhythm styles by watching them.
Wow.
And so that's kind of, how I have learned what I know so far about how to play the blues. So I am, as any good blues musician will tell you, an aspiring blues musician.
All right. So how many bands are you in right now, and where can people see you? And are you able to put any of that information on Matured Musicians so they can go to one of your gigs and see for themselves what you played?
Well, I have a website for my band. Yes. It's chrisstevensblues.com, and I try to keep our schedule posted, update.
Okay.
It's not as strong as it was before COVID.
Yeah.
Because during the COVID period, we didn't play at all for many months.
Did you even
did some outdoor things at, a gig that I've done for many years is playing at Destination Harley for the Harley Davidson Company down in Fife, play on Saturday afternoons. And we continued to do that for a while outside, playing outside. But most all the indoor stuff stopped. So currently, the gigs that I have are every once in a while, about once a month, myself and either solo or myself and Jack Cook will play at Barrel's Wine Bar here in my neighborhood on Mercer Island on a Friday night. That's something that is kind of regular. Maybe occasionally we'll do the Destination Harley gigs. We did one a couple of weeks ago, and it's cold now, but we can play inside.
Right.
I've done some things that I used to do, like performing at Third Place Commons. It's a concert setting, and also at Crossroads, Bellevue.
Yes, I know about that. That's my end of town.
Yeah, and I have been, somewhat invited to do some of the jams that have cropped up again. They all disappeared, these jam gigs where the leader will hire a guest artist, and I would be a guest artist.
Yeah.
And I guess we have played a few gigs at a place I didn't used to play, but have done now, and that's the Burien Eagles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I read
They're
something about
hiring
that.
bands,
Yeah.
blues bands.
Yes.
So they've been nice.
Did you
So the schedule is not real heavy, but it seems like, I've been doing something maybe once a week.
Yeah. Well,
although I notice my December schedule looks pretty blank at the moment.
if there's anybody out there listening that wants to hire a good band, there's this
That's right.
Chris Stevens band. How many other bands are you in? There are a couple of them.
Well,
what was the other one?
Just when I play a duo with Jack.
Okay.
Barrels. And then we do have this group called Three Guitars.
Yeah, that's
Ryan Butler and Jack and myself, and we have played just the three of us, and we also will have a bassist and a drummer. And we don't play very often, a couple of times a year. That started out as a gig that we would do at the Highway 99 Blues Club.
Yeah.
Which, as you may know, closed some time ago.
Oh, I did know it closed. Oh,
and then, And then
do you know a young man in the Mount Vernon area called Chris Egger? I think it's his dad's like a bass player.
I think I may have met him at one of the jams that Doug McGrew hosted.
Oh, okay.
I think it was he who was playing guitar. He was an guest artist out in Issaquah at a place out there where Doug had a jam going.
Okay.
And I believe I saw him play there. I'm pretty sure that was the guy.
Okay. Yeah.
What about him?
He had a concert at the Lincoln Theater in Mount Vernon with a man that I kind of like. Is rockabilly and vintage music. He takes it, makes it new again. Called Eric Heatherly, and he does blues. I think he was like the guy nominated for the Blues Society or whatever it is that you have in this area. So I'm beginning to get to the point where I like it. I didn't like it prior to this, but I'm coming around.
Very good.
So do you belong to that Blues Society, whatever it's called, the area one?
The Washington Blues Society?
Yeah. Yes.
I am not a member of the Washington Blues Society.
Oh, okay. Well,
sorry.
Well, I'm not advocating for it. So, all right. So I don't want to keep you too long. I know you have a lesson to prepare for, but I wish it was a little bit longer because I have a lot of other questions. But, I had a laugh when you said that you didn't think you could do an hour and find enough material to do an hour show. And there's so many questions that I'd still want to ask you about your playing and your background. And obviously we just can't do that. But one of the things that I do ask the musicians is, what was during all this time, from the time you were 13 to now and playing music, did you have any one of those aha moments that said, oh my gosh, I've done the right thing, learning all this and doing it and becoming good at it?
Oh gosh. Well, things didn't happen that quickly. Wow, now I'm really good. No, I don't think I've been a very fast learner. I'll tell you one thing that happened to me. Okay, so this is I don't know, maybe it's amusing. So when I began playing and had to play in public, like when I described being in these jazz ensembles,
right,
every once in a while there would be a concert.
Right.
And we had to play for an audience. And I would do okay if I was just playing rhythm and I was totally background. I was actually good at that. But maybe if there was a part that was was a feature part for me to play that, I told you I didn't really get to play the improvised solos much.
Right.
And when I got into college, I did get a couple of tunes where I got to play, and I'm going to tell you why. So I would get very, very nervous.
Oh.
And if I was going to be, I knew people, my hands would start to shake.
Oh.
And I just couldn't play. It would just be awful. I couldn't play well. So one day in college, we were in rehearsal, and he introduced a new tune we were going to play, and it was a jazz blues. And he said, "Okay, anybody that wants to get a solo in this song, we'll play it, and you can take a turn, and and I'll tell you if you get a solo." So it came to my turn, and he points at me.
Uh-oh.
And the song's going, it's a pretty up-tempo song. So, boom, 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 boom. So what happened was I started shaking, but my right hand was shaking in a perfect triplet rhythm to the song. So I was able to just put my pick to the strings, and I was able to play this like really fast solo. And I got the solo. I got to play it after that, and of course I would get nervous, when I played it. But that was a moment that really lucked out for me, because of my issue that I had. And then it really was not until a couple of years after that, I had mentioned that I was in this band in the Army. Yes. And we did an outdoor, I remember distinctly, we did an outdoor concert, and I didn't get nervous. And I don't know why, but after that, I really didn't much have a problem with that again. So they weren't really moments of realizing that I had learned something, or that, gee, now I'm good. But they were moments that sort of allowed me to be able to relax a little better.
Right.
And that's kind of important in, it's actually very important in being able to feel like you're playing well, is how relaxed you can be.
Absolutely. I have a couple of comments here. Not sure who it is. Maybe Raymond Hayden. I'm not sure. He didn't identify himself, but he said, "Great story." And also, nerves affect us all differently for sure. And when we're speaking of nerves, when I don't care where I go or where I play, my mouth goes dry. And then it's almost impossible to sing because everything is dry. And it's like, that's where I notice my nerves. So, yes.
Well, I have to tell my students all the time, they come in and they tell me, "I really played it good at home."
Yeah.
Yes, I know. Because there's different stages of learning things.
Yes.
The first stage is when you're at home and doing it by yourself, and I got it. And then the next step is to play it with somebody or in front of somebody. Right. And that takes more. You have to have, your timing has to be right, and you have to not get nervous, and all that stuff comes into play that you have to overcome to get to that next point where you actually can play the thing.
All right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, I know all about that. I mean, there are plenty of things that I learn, that I'll learn a lick that I think is really cool. Mm-hmm. And then I'll be on playing with a band. Okay, I'm going to play this lick now, and I can't do it. Huh, it takes a few times to try it, right, to where, you can actually coordinate it with the band.
I'm just learning the walk ups and walk downs, and I'm I haven't been able to do it on the stage yet because I can do it at home, but that's about it. We get another comment here. He said, I started performing early in drum and a bugle corps. Oh, this has to be Raymond. Practicing with the metronome, and I found that through the years, that really helps my muscle memory and dealing with nerves because things just happen naturally due to that type of intention. What are your thoughts on metronome rehearsing? Sorry, I can't. This computer is different. I barely read it.
Sometimes I will practice with the metronome, and I think it's a good thing to do if you are able to do that. In other words,
Yeah.
some people are not at a level where they can keep up with the metronome.
Yeah.
They just don't, like you're trying to play a chord progression and you're learning it and you can't change the chords fast enough.
Yeah.
So it's not time at that point for you to use the metronome.
Yeah.
It's time for you to use the metronome when you can play something all the way through. And then it will help you to get your timing right. Or, I kind of use it for practicing, playing faster things where I'll practice scales and I want to, increase the speed. So I'll set it to a certain level.
Right.
And then I'll play some scales or some passages. And then I'll step it up and play a little bit faster. And then I'll get to the point where I can't do it. So then I'll back it off a little bit. And then I might be able to advance it again. So you can kind of use it in that way to force yourself to learn to play faster and accurately.
Well, I've been recording in Chad Chris Studio, and he uses the metronome. We lay down a track, and then I practice playing and singing to that track with the metronome going in the back, the tuck thing.
Right.
But once you learn that piece, I found that once you learn it and you remember the chords and you remember the words, you can increase that an awfully lot, even more than what the audience could dance to, for example. So yeah, I have a timing problem. So that's that's what I have to do to keep that tempo. And jams just ruin me because nobody really knows my music. Most of you guys are blues or rock or something, and so it's kind of difficult to retain the timing and counting in your head when you're in a jam. So I get it.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you're in a jam, the different musicians have sort of a different sense of timing.
Yeah.
And that is true. Everybody that you play with really does have a different sense of timing.
All right.
And you have to learn to coordinate with that.
Well, Doug McGrew is pretty good at that. He always makes sure that I send him the music before I play something so that he has an idea of what to do with it. And he kind of keeps everybody on track, thank God. But we do have another comment here, and it says, is that a Beatle poster behind your guest?
It is.
Is it?
Of course it is.
Oh.
Do you recognize those faces?
Yeah, I didn't get it. I didn't see that it was a Beatles poster, but apparently he did.
Oh, yeah.
So I have to, do you know the band Heart?
Well, I know of them, okay. Certainly.
Well, Chad Chris does the Heart by Heart, and the girls learning their story and etc. Were Beatle fans, and I've had people come on here.
Of course they were.
Yeah, they were Led Zeppelin and all kinds of other things too. But yeah, it seems like a lot of people listen to the Beatles. I love their music. I didn't have to play it back then. And yeah, there's a lot of musicians that seem to really have taken something out of the songs that they wrote and played. Yeah. So you're not alone. And I guess there's a lot of Beatle fans out there.
No, I'm obviously not alone. No.
All right.
Very well. Well, it's a pleasure to have been with you here. It's looking like I'm getting really close to the time where I'm going to
Yeah,
have
I see that. Yeah.
to,
You took a lot of you're almost right up to that hour mark, and I knew you could. I
very
just
close.
knew you had stories and experiences to tell, guys. So I'm real glad you came on, and I do hope to have you back sometime later in the future when things are picking up and people are out and about.
Yes, I am looking forward to more of that. I hope.
Amen. All right. Well,
Uh,
thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, nothing. That was
Okay.
sorry to
I
interrupt
just
you.
Okay. I just want to thank all the people that were listening today. Again, this is Chris Stevens from the Chris Stevens Band, and we've enjoyed your time with us, and hope you do it again sometime in the
Thank you,
future.
Joy.
All right, Guy. See ya. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.